guys, my name is Mayana. Welcome to my Core. Today I'm going to be talking about my DNFs so far this year. So I am very proud of myself. If you've never watched me before, I am a terrible DNFer because I read pretty fast, so I'm kind of just like, okay, what's the point? But this year I'm getting into the part where just like I just want to read what I want to read. I've already reached my reading goal for the year. So not that you should be reading for your reading goal, but I've already reached it, so I want to read for my enjoyment. I want to read like the books that I own. Like, I don't know, I just want to be better at that, right? Before I reach I always reach my reading goal at the same point every year, but before I do, I find myself always reading just the shittiest books ever just so I can finish it and be like, okay, one book closer to my reading goal. But this year I really cut that shit out, right? So I think I DNF'd 14 books so far this year. So we're just gonna go through the 14 books that I DNF'd. So starting off with the first book of the year, I DNF'd this book called Along Came the Girl. But if you know me, then you know that whenever I am watching something like a movie or a TV show, I need to read like something similar. So earlier this year, I got into like One Chicago, which is a TV show franchise that includes Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and Chicago PD. I specifically was watching Chicago Med for a romance between an Asian character and a black character, and I wanted to see more about that, so I watched it all for them. Honestly, I ended up stopped watching it once they got together because they kind of were a toxic couple, and I know that they end up getting married anyway, so I kind of just stopped watching the show. But in that time frame, I was like, I want to read about firefighters and nurses, and so I found a romance about a firefighter and a nurse. I got 11% into the book. I don't even remember what this book was about. Honestly, I don't even remember reading this book. That's probably why I DNF'd it. So what is this? This is about a firefighter who swears to uphold the 2 cardinal rules set in his firehouse: no drama and no dating the chief's daughter. He has no idea the blazing beauty is his boss's daughter until it's too late. Now the 2 pink lines send everything up in smoke. So yeah, this is about a nurse and she might be pregnant. I don't know. I got 11% into this book. It was so fucking boring. I just didn't give a fuck, and the cover's ugly. So then I read this book called Fire Up. This was still in like my firefighter era. So I did DNF this 10% in. What was this about? This is, yeah, I guess he arrives at the scene of an accident and he ends up enamored in the girl who's like a single mom. I DNF'd this 10% in because I thought it was like very corny and it was told from the guy's perspective. It might have been dual POV, but I think I don't like dual POV because I think that like the men in romance books in dual POV, they're always just like very corny, or their thought process just comes off very misogynistic, and I just think that like, I don't know how men think, and I hate when authors try to attempt that. I used to hate that back in like my Wattpad years too, like ugh. So then I read this book called The Vegas Lie, and I'm pretty sure this was like a married in Vegas trope, because I also went through a phase where I wanted to read waking up married in Vegas books because I read The Partner Plot and I really enjoyed that, so I want to read more. And I ended up DNFing this one 10% in because it was just too fluffy, and they like obviously liked each other in the beginning, so it felt like it was going to end up being insta love. And like if it's going to be a married in Vegas trope, I think it needs to be like a slow burn, or like a, oh, we don't know, we're both interested in each other. Because I think that like married in Vegas tropes are like a very quick trope. So then I read this book called The Terraformers, which I DNF'd at 4% in. This wasn't like a hard DNF. This is more like a comeback later, but I don't know if I'll ever come back to it. I just couldn't really get into it, and it's out of my usual comfort zone. So because I usually read mostly space sci-fi, and I don't even know how to explain what this book was about. Also, I read it because I wanted to get into terraforming, like making like little plants in jars. So I honestly wanted to just read it simply because I want to get into that. I don't know how to correlate. Don't ask me why I think the things that I think, okay? So yeah, this follows up. This is like multi-generational, if I remember correctly, about families inheriting like this terraforming thing. But it was just way out of my comfort zone for sci-fi. Like, it's not something I typically read, so I just put it down for a minute and I just never went back to it. Okay, and then I read this book called Monsters Manor. This was in my monster romance phase that I had again this year, because if you had one last year and I had one again this year, because I think monster romances can be fun. I don't even remember what this was about. I say all the time. Yeah, this is like a love triangle type of book, and I think they're all supposed to be like getting with each other or something like that. I DNF'd this. Oh man, my screen reloaded. Y'all know how Goodreads is. I DNF'd that's 26% in. So like, if I would have gotten to the 50% mark, y'all know I would have just finished it. I never, once I get to 50%, I have to really, really hate a book to DNF at 50%. So then I read this book called How to Become a Dark Lord in Dark Trying, and I DNF'd it 4% in, which is so crazy because I felt like I was reading this forever. Like, I feel like I got at least like 12% to the book. Like, I felt like I was reading it forever. I read this book for my NetGalley vlog, so if you want to see me DNF it, like, I guess you can go watch it. Yeah, so from what I remember, this book is about this girl who is like cursed to like live the same life over and over again. So she's like a eternal Groundhog's Day, and so one day she just decides that she's gonna become a Dark Lord, and like, she can't really die because she cursed to like come back to life. So I ended up DNFing it because it's supposed to be fantasy. It's set in another, first of all, it's supposed to be fantasy, but it's set in another, it's set in our world, but it's like, they acknowledge our world, but it's fantasy, but it's set in a different world. And like, her terms are just a little bit too modern for me, and it's like she makes a lot of like jokes and stuff throughout the book, and at first it was like funny and like really endearing and like really interesting, but then after a while it just got like really annoying. And there was just like too many pop culture references. I already don't like pop culture references in like contemporary, so in fantasy it was really just pissing me off because I read fantasy to get free from pop culture references. What do you mean I'm stuck here? And then I soft DNF Chain Gang All Stars. I DNF'd at 21%. I actually soft DNF'd this book twice, so I might not go back to it. I read the ebook and then I listened to the audiobook, and I just don't think the book is for me necessarily. Like, it was interesting, but it just couldn't like hold my attention. Like, I'm not gonna say it was boring like I said like the other books were, because it definitely was far from boring. It just wasn't like, I just feel like I was like grasping, like it wasn't like catching my attention fully. So this might be one that I go back to in the future. Then I DNF'd The Art of Prophecy. I actually was having a lot of fun in the beginning of the book. I DNF'd at 21% and I was having a lot of fun. The thing is, I read a lot of my audiobooks while I'm like washing the dishes or doing my chores. So once I'm done with them and I like turn it off to like go do whatever, I like think about the book and I'm like, okay, well, do I want to go back to that? That's also been like why I've been DNFing so many things so far. So once I was like doing my chores or whatever, because I was like, that was like a cleaning day that I read that book, so I got pretty far, and then once I like sat down and I really thought about it, I was like, do I really want to go back to this book? I found it was interesting, but a lot of people said like halfway through the book like it kind of like got really boring, and then the second book also doesn't live up to this. So I think it's supposed to be a trilogy, so I think I might wait until all 3 books are out, or I might come back to that like in the future. Like, I don't know. I also DNF'd Breaking Time by Sasha Alsberg. I got 2% into this. I was gonna do a reading vlog where I read it, like, you know, like when her book came out like a few years ago, like that sci-fi book, when that came out, everybody had vlogs for it. I missed that time of like, this is gonna sound so terrible, I missed the time of like hate reading things just for the fun of it, like, you know. And it's just like we weren't really in that time anymore, like, to like hate. And it's like, especially like other booktubers, especially because I have booktube friends who are gonna be releasing books soon, and so like I don't plan on releasing a book, and if I do, it's gonna be under a pen name. So y'all, I'm not really trying to like not review books. It's like, oh, I want to look up. Trust me, when I'm releasing a book, you won't know it, because I'm not releasing one under my name. If I were to release one, I'm good on writing my fan fiction, to be honest. But yeah, so I just didn't. The book was bad. I'm gonna be real with y'all. I'm gonna have to be honest. The book was bad. Like, I couldn't even like read it just to hate on it. Like, it wasn't good. Like, I'm sorry. I also DNF'd To Sir Philip with Love. I kind of just, it wasn't even like I didn't even really read it. I could read like the first like prologue or whatever, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's not for me. I have a reading vlog. I filmed so many reading vlogs. I don't know what is up and what is not up. It should be up. I had a reading vlog where I read the Bridgerton books, and I had a reading vlog where I read the Bridgerton books, and I was like, I just didn't feel right like just completing the vlog and not having read all the books. So I didn't even include it in the vlog because I was just like, no, I'm not gonna do it. So I read like 1 chapter and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not reading it. And then lastly, I DNF'd Lore of the Wilds. Very unfortunate because I was really excited for this book to come out. I DNF'd this book like 2% in. I like literally, me and my best friend Jemiah, we're gonna buddy read this book together. And so I like started before bed, as I do, because I read 50 pages before bed. But I couldn't get it to 50 pages, so I read a chapter of this. So I read a chapter of this before bed, and I was struggling to get through it, and I just didn't really like it. I wasn't really feeling it. So the next morning I woke up and I was like, I got the audiobook in, and I was like, I'm gonna listen to the audiobook. Then I was like, you know what, I got the ebook, like whatever, fuck it. So I returned the audiobook, and then it just like days had went by, and I was like, you know what, it's a DNF. I don't want to read it. I have been seeing, y'all, I've seen so many tweets. I seen so many tweets, I seen so many TikToks, and if people wasn't even naming the book, and I knew exactly what they're talking about. They were like, oh, this fairy book came out, it's really, everyone's talking about it, it's a black book, but I'm not liking it, I'm not having fun, it's not that good. Then I go and I look at the reviews from my friends, and like none of them are really liking the book. It's just so unfortunate because I feel like there were a lot of things that could have been fixed from what I saw that like weren't, and like it's just so crazy because I remember I was so excited for this book to come out last September, and it didn't, and it got pushed back to February so that it could be traditionally published. And it's like the traditional publishers didn't really read it or go over anything. They were like, you're gonna be, even though she's never released anything before, it just felt like nobody like went through it, and they were just like, oh, whatever, we'll just publish it. And yeah, so I guess I'll be reading like if she writes a series after this, but I'm not going to be reading this book or the rest of the series just because it was not for me. Like reading all the reviews, yeah. So that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Tell me what you've DNF'd so far this year. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.